Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, Matt Rhule, Nebraska, kicking off spring practice, going into year 3. And this is one of those teams that, I think according to the national media, kind of flying under the radar a little bit. But I think within the Nebraska fan base, at least what y'all are putting in the comment section, what I see on Twitter, there's a lot of optimism about what this Nebraska team can be in the 2025 season. Dill, as you kick off spring practice, you're starting to hear some early returns on some new faces coming into the program. But I want to be a little bit more broad today. Now, let's talk about what are the storylines that we're most excited about for Nebraska going into spring practice. But at the same time, there are still some question marks that you still might have with Nebraska that you want to see answered during spring practice as well. I'm fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, a quick shout out to the Nebraska fans. Y'all, when the boys started doing this a couple of years ago, this was largely one of the best, one of the only fan bases, quite frankly, that showed the fellas some love. We appreciate you guys more than y'all know. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, y'all always let it fly in the comment section. Would love to hear kind of some of the storylines that y'all are most excited about as well. Dill, without further ado, we'll get to the question marks, but I want to start, positive vibes only for this Nebraska team, largely going into 2025 and going into spring practice. What excites you the most about Nebraska going into 2025?
I mean, I think it really does start with the hope that you can finally have a really exciting passing attack. And it's been something that Nebraska, it feels like, has been looking for a really long time.
Yes.
I think you saw that Rhule was the guy. I don't think anyone
Yes.
should be questioning that at this point. I think you probably have the most talented group of wide receivers around him, and that includes the tight end position, which I think I'm very excited for to kind of finally hopefully get some production from that unit. And you've had some guys, obviously Fedone, a really talented player, never really put it on the field and was super productive. Guys like Carter Nelson. I mean, I even think you sleep on a guy like Mac Markway, a guy who at LSU is just kind of like overshadowed by some really, really good tight ends led by Mason Taylor. I want to see if that position, because again, you kind of know, I think, what you have with the wideouts, it's going to be a really good unit. Can they finally get that tight end rolling? But at the end of the day, I do think this wide receiver or this passing attack should be probably the best Nebraska's seen in probably 15 years.
Oh, 100%. And you're leaving out arguably the biggest storyline, and that is Dana Holgorsen taking over the offense. Still, he's one of the best offense coordinators in the game, like just quite frankly, and it's a massive step up from Coach Satterfield. I mean, we had question marks about Coach Satterfield originally when Matt Rhule hired him. Certainly had question marks after the first 2 years. There are a lot of driving forces that is kind of pushing this Nebraska offense, specifically the passing attack, in the right direction going into 2025. Now, you start with the quarterback in Dillon, who I agree with you. Like, what was it perfect from the true freshman in 2024? No, but there were a lot of really good things you like, and he is clearly going to take a step going into 2025. The pass catchers are infinitely better than what they were in the 2024 year. Now, it was solid in 2024. I think this unit has a chance to be great. I mean, Dane Key to me is one of the best wide receivers in the Big Ten. I am extremely high on Hardly Gilmore coming from Kentucky. He's getting a lot of positive reviews coming out of winter workouts. True freshman Cortez Mills as well. So you have better pass catchers. Your quarterback's going to get better. And I think you have a better offensive play caller as well. Kind of reminds you a little bit, Dale, of Kay Klubnik. When Kay Klubnik struggled in that 2023 year as a redshirt freshman, and then took that massive step in 2024 because he got better as a quarterback and had better things around him. I think you might see a very similar storyline for Dillon going into that second year of football for him in Nebraska.
No, I think probably the key question you'll have is what are the tackles going to be? I'm pretty comfortable that the interior for this offensive line is going to be quite good. If that passing attack's going to hum, you can't do that if you don't have adequate tackle play. And I do think it largely comes down to Elijah Pritchett. I thought Gunnar Gatula showed a fair amount. I think he's kind of coming along in the way he needs to. Thought he had a really nice bowl game against Boston College. Elijah Pritchett is a fascinating one because you can look at two different games. Go to the Georgia game. He looked very, very good. I think me and you look at each other like, oh, if he's turning the corner, Alabama might have a really good offensive line. And then you go next week, you go play Vanderbilt, and he plays horrible, like uncompetitive football, really you could argue probably cost him that football game. What do you get from him? Now, you've seen, I think, Matt Rhule do a really good job both developing guys from the freshman classes, but also doing a good job with transfer portal offensive linemen like Mazakua, obviously Ben Scott
Ben
as
Scott,
well.
yeah.
What can they do with Elijah Pritchett to get him rolling? Because I do think he's kind of the key. Because aside from Gunnar Gattulla, you really don't have anyone at this point I feel totally confident in. Because Teddy Prohaska and Turner Corcoran, it hasn't been put together yet. And I know there's been some health, but I don't really feel great if one of those is the guy going into the year.
So my take on Nebraska's offensive line, and I kind of agree with you, even though you lose a guy like Ben Scott at the center position. I mean, I think Justin Evans can slide into that center spot, or Sam Sledge, and, kind of pick up from where Ben Scott left off. I look at the inside of the offensive line. I'm with you. I think it's going to be pretty dang good. The tackle position. Now, what's exciting about Elijah Pritchett, dude, this kid was made in a laboratory. Like, you could not build a tackle that looks better than Elijah Pritchett. Now it's like, hey, does it come to fruition on the football field, like you said, on a consistent basis? Because look, you can't have that inconsistent level that we saw from Elijah in the 2024 year, especially at the tackle position. Dude, the offensive line finally feels like the depth is where it needs to be. I think when Matt Rhule first got there, we were forced to play some players that just weren't ready. Turner Corcoran in that 2023 year. Now I look at it and say the combination of, hey, we're going to use the transfer portal, bringing guys like Rocco Spindler and Elijah Pritchett, but we're also going to stack a lot of bodies in our high school classes. Going into 2025, this is probably the deepest offensive line that you have, and you kind of hope that depth allows you to play better up front on the offensive line. Here's to
Now,
me.
now, one thing I wouldn't mind hearing is Graham Bricks being able to make some noise because, again, you didn't really get to see a ton of him as a
Agreed.
true freshman. I did watch that UTEP game. I think he has tackle athleticism. And again, I was kind of judging that off like one or two pass sets. I don't know. It was not a lot, but you can kind of get a sense. Oh, is that guy moving his feet the way he's supposed to be moving his feet or not? I did kind of get the sense that he can go play tackle. I would love to hear some buzz around him being able to be like a guy they trust to put on the field. Because I do look, if this is going to work, I think for Matt Rhule, that type of guy they bring in, I would like to see work and probably work early, to be very honest.
I agree with you, and I agree with you with the athleticism take. We covered Grant Bricks out of high school. This dude is a very big athlete that knew would need a year, but it certainly, like, you kind of want to see him put it together going into year two. Here's my last question on offense. The depth at running back, and do you get is Emmett Johnson a difference maker for you in the 2024 year? Because I would argue that
stretch. He was awesome. I thought
he was, and I don't think that's a coincidence with like Dana Holgerson coming in and starting to call the plays late in the season. That's when you saw Emmett Johnson play his best football. Now he briefly enters the transfer portal. I think this Nebraska staff did everything they could to keep him in Lincoln for one more year, which worked, and obviously. I look at it, and the Nebraska fans who've been rocking with the fellas for a while know how I feel. Like, I just felt like last year, okay, there were a bunch of solid running backs, and that's probably all I'd say, but nobody really separated. And Matt Rhule even said this in the press conference. Nobody really separated themselves. Whether it was Emmett Johnson or Dante Dowdle or Ramir Johnson, can Emmett Johnson, he's going to be the guy. If somebody separates and becomes a difference maker in the running back room, to me, it's going to be Emmett Johnson. Can he be that guy for Nebraska? Because what's one of the best things you can do for a young quarterback? Yes, it starts with maybe surrounding him with some better pass catchers, which Nebraska did. Give Dylan a better and more consistent run game in 2025, and I think you're going to see this kid take the next step.
Going over the other thing you like about Emmett Johnson is that he gave them easy throws. I mean, when Dana took over, they started to use him a little bit more out of the backfield, and they had a lot of easy access stuff. They were able to move the ball in the air. So again, I think his talent out of the backfield that frankly the other guys on that team really didn't show a ton of. I do think that matters because Dana liked to go to that running back out of the backfield.
That's one of the things I love about Dana in general is like he looks for things easy for the quarterback, and he looks for ways to get quarterbacks involved and confident. And using the running back out of the backfield is one of those things. Defensive side of the football, Dill, let's start with what you're most excited for on this defense going into spring practice.
Oh, it's the linebackers by far. I look at what this linebacker room can be. especially if Vincent Shavers like can just be that guy because like, he's like the one who pops like off the screen. You look a different level of athleticism. He kind of has
Yep.
the size you want. I'm a huge Javin Wright fan, but I do look Vincent Shavers gives them like elite linebacker play. Like I frankly I think he can. This linebacker room will probably be one of the better units in the Big Ten,
So
if not.
Nebraska's always had solid linebacker rooms, right? But it's always been solid at best. They've probably been limited from an athletic profile standpoint over the last couple of years. That is not the case in Dill. Quite frankly, I would say this about the Nebraska defense as a whole. What has Matt Rhule done during his first 24 months in Lincoln, Nebraska? We're betting on traits at the high school ranks. We're betting on guys that, hey, they might not be the best football players right now, but they got either big time size, big time athleticism, big time speed. We're going to bet on the athlete. We're going to make them good football players. Look at this defense. It's a bunch of really big athletes. Like, this is probably the fastest, most athletic defense we've seen Nebraska have in a really long time. Now, does it all come together for this Nebraska defense? That's what I'm looking for, but nothing is a better example than what they are at linebacker. Vincent Shavers, we're all fired up about him. Javin Wright, a big, long guy that has kind of spun down from a safety to become a linebacker. Dude, what about Hassan McAuliffe? I mean, 2 years ago when he transferred from Indiana to Oklahoma, we were talking about maybe one of the better players in the country on the defensive side of the football. Goes to Oklahoma, deals with some injuries, deals with like not really knowing what position he's going to be. Played a little bit.
They never. That didn't make a ton of sense how they were using him and really keeping him out in space. And like again, he probably should be more
played him at
along
nickel.
Scrimmage. And yeah, I'm with you. I think like his lack of success at Oklahoma was probably just him and that Oklahoma staff not really identifying a great fit in making it work.
And he dealt with injuries too, but I'm with you. Like, it just couldn't, because he was coming from Indiana as like one of the best pass rushers in the Big Ten as a true freshman. And we're gonna take him away off the line of scrimmage. It was confusing. That Jack linebacker spot, there's not a position that makes more sense for this kid going into 2025.
And him and Willis McGahee should be savages, I think, because Willis McGahee is one of those guys you're looking at like the next round of like, okay, these are NFL bodies, these are NFL players. They're giving NFL juice. Like that's what you need to see more from this defense, especially along the line of scrimmage. I mean, you obviously had great guys on the inside, but can you get a little bit more impactful from the edge than you probably have been?
Yeah, and Deshaun just there's probably not a player I'm more excited to track in spring practice than Deshaun. I'll answer my own question here in terms of what I'm excited for. It's two things. You kind of noted it, the edge guys, whether it's Cam, whether it's Williams-Nwaneri, whether it's Willis McGahee, whether it's Deshaun, like that. That's a very intriguing group that can have an awfully high ceiling. And like you said, all the production, especially in the pass rush for the last couple of years, maybe outside of James Williams, has come from the inside, from guys like Ty and Nash. We gotta get our edge rushers going a little bit more. Well, you have the bodies to do that in 2025. Dill, in the safety room or largely the secondary in general, it's one better fits. Like, they weren't deep enough last year when they started to get some injuries. Like, you're playing a guy like Malcolm Hartzog as a boundary cornerback. He's 5'9" and slow. It's just like, I think Malcolm Hartzog's, and I know that sounds kind of mean, he's a good football player, probably not the best boundary cornerback. Like, now you have the depth to make sure guys are in their right positions, which should certainly help. Dill, I'll ask you this to kind of wind it down here. Biggest question mark that you want to see get answered. I think me and you are going to agree with this. I think every single Nebraska fan who follows this program closely is going to believe this as well. What do you got for us here?
Yeah, and you're pretty much like leading into it. I mean, it's the interior defensive line. You lose two absolute monsters who have been there now for 2 or 3 years and have kind of been, frankly, the face of this program.
Yep.
I do think Elijah Judy was starting to play better football. I think like through a good chunk of his career at Nebraska, we were kind of like, I think, leaving a lot to be desired. I did think the last couple of games he was playing well enough, but frankly, I think he's still probably want him to be a depth piece. Like, I don't think he's a starting defensive tackle right now. At least that's not what I'd probably want to see. Probably like to hear something from Gabe Moore. Riley Van Poppel, huge fan of him. One guy that I'm kind of looking for, frankly, is Dylan Parrott. I think he looked awesome at times last year. He's kind of one of the guys that, like, again, you've kind of heard some rumblings from him, Goldman, some other guys. Dylan Parrott's the guy I'm kind of looking for. Can he step up and make some things happen?
I think what's probably fair to say is you're not going to have the difference makers that you had last year. Like, I don't think you're going to have unless Riley Van Poppel would be my pick. If you ask me, all right, who can replace the disruption in production, it'd be Riley. But I think most Nebraska fans are, all right, hey, we recognize that maybe we won't have the difference makers that we did last year, especially with a guy like Ty Robinson. Okay, well, the question is, are you deep enough? Because last year you had Ty, you had Nash, but you didn't really have enough depth, especially deciding to redshirt Riley Van Poppel, which I'll take to my grave was just a really confusing move by Matt Rhule, you might say. Are you deep enough? Like, do you have six guys, six bodies in the middle of that defensive line that you trust to play high level football? That's what I want to see. Okay,
Well,
we're
because
not gonna
even
have
like a
the
Jalen George, like you even where is he going to slot in? And that's like kind of one of those
yeah.
hard ones. Like I don't know that he'll play a ton on the inside, especially on run downs. He's
He's
just
gonna
not a
have
huge
to.
player.
Know who also could do? Williams Winery is low key like kind of a monster. I
Big
think he's
boy.
pushing 280. He's a big boy. He's 6'7". So like maybe he kicks in. McKeown Davis probably another name that maybe could. We'll kind of see. They got to
That's like
figure out
how,
that
how
front.
tough can they be against like good run teams is probably going
Yeah.
to be the question. Because you're right, they have some guys who are like talented players that I think can slot in on pass rush downs, but like, are they going to be deep enough and good enough for teams that want to be able to pound on them?
Well, I think about what happened with that Illinois game Friday night. That was a heartbreaker for the boys, right? Where
Oh, yeah.
it's like Illinois just got to their depth, and in the second half, Nebraska, you could tell Nebraska didn't have the depth to play 4 quarters in that football game. You want to avoid those situations in the 2025 year. We'll close it out there. It's going to be a really fun spring practice because of what I said at the top. There's a lot of potential and high ceiling football players on this team. All right, what players kind of reach those ceilings and what players break out there in spring practice? We'll kind of get a feel for who's going to be the difference makers 2025. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.